Welcome back, listener, to the Inspired Writer Collective podcast. I'm your co host, Stephanie, and I'm here today with Hannah, who is going to be sharing some great information about marketing for authors. So, Hannah, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hey, thanks for having me, Stephanie. So, as you said, I am Hannah. I am a marketing strategist and website designer for fiction authors who want to sell more books.
Great. And one of the things I know when we were talking the other day that was really cool to hear about is you talked a lot about the importance of not falling into some of the trends
hmm
when thinking about marketing. Because I know, we as writers, we get overwhelmed by everything that's out there. So, what are your thoughts about, you know, getting yourself back on social media if you've taken a break or getting on if you're resisting?
Yeah, my whole marketing philosophy is if you don't want to do it, don't do it. And if you want to do it, it needs to be sustainable. So there's going to be ebbs and flows in your schedule where you can, crank up your content volume more and experiment, see, do you like more versus less? But your general rhythm should be sustainable and feel like an extension of your creativity, not like it's robbing time from your writing. So with trends, you kind of run into where it can be good for your content to try some. And if one resonates with you, most authors I feel like aren't going to resonate with, TikTok dance trends. Like, I feel like that's all one we can mostly collectively skip. But say there's trending audio on Instagram, you know, if you don't like the trend that everyone's doing, you can still use the audio and do something completely different. The algorithm will give it a boost just because it thinks that people like videos with that audio. So that's kind of a workaround, or you can just plain skip something if it doesn't align with you. Like a lot of times the training audio, I'm like, this sound has nothing to do with, the posts that I'm doing. Like it would make no sense. Like so just skip it. Like honestly, it, you need to do what works for you and find that rhythm where you're like, I, you know, I don't love that I'm doing this, but I'm okay with it. Like, I didn't, no authors really love marketing, but I'd like to get you to that point. I think it is achievable, but there should be at least a tolerable balance where it's okay, this is, you know, what I have to do, but it shouldn't feel like it's robbing everything and sucking all your energy and soul out of your body. And you're like, why did I even want to do this in the first place? Like, if you're in that camp, you definitely need to take a step back and, you know, not put all the pressure on yourself to do things a certain way.
And do you feel that there are a certain number of times per week for posting? I know you specialize in Instagram, but across the board, is there a recommendation of, to
Yeah.
make it more sustainable?
Yeah, for me. So I always start with the Instagram and kind of tan my way out because I do email marketing too. And then I personally don't delve into TikTok a lot, but you could repurpose what you're doing for Instagram on TikTok pretty easily. So I'd post once a day, 5 times per week on Instagram in the feed. Stories, you can do more, you can do less, you can just kind of let that be whatever feels organic to you. There's not really a rhythm to that as much, but if you do more than one post in the feed, at least on Instagram, and again, maybe TikTok is different and more sensitive to this, um, you actually end up kind of hurting your reach on posts most of the time because unless you have something going truly viral where it's getting millions of views, which, is not easy at all. Like if you have that happen, that is great. We're going to take it. We're going to celebrate it. That's not typical. So with that in mind, if you post twice, Instagram's only going to give you X amount of time they've decided to dedicate depending on how your content is. So if you split that over 2 posts, let's say they're going to give you 1,000 views a day. That's not very much. And I'd like it to be more than that, but just for a round number, they're probably going to split it, 500 each. It's like you could have just posted once and had 1,000, and then maybe you would have taken it off because it's more views on one thing. So usually I say 3 reels, one carousel, and let the fifth one be a wild card depending on what you're wanting to post about. You could do another reel, you could do another carousel. Single feed posts don't do as well right now. That's not to say you can't throw that in and have that be part of your content because again, you just want to make this something you enjoy, and if you want to post something that it's just a single photo, go for it. But that's usually the rhythm I recommend. And then you can take whatever you're turning into reels, post them the same exact thing on TikTok and even YouTube Shorts. You don't need to be creating different content for different platforms with, a caveat once in a while. Again, if there's something that sparks creativity that's happening over on TikTok and you want to make one special thing, go for it. But again, for the norm, the sustainability every week, it shouldn't be having to do that constantly. And then I recommend for newsletters once a week, which I've been posting about that lately on social media. And I can tell a lot of people are just in shock because authors tend to do monthly newsletters. And I'm like, no, you need to do them more often. But again, they should be quicker. If you're finding newsletters are overwhelming you, you're making them too long and too complicated. It shouldn't take more than 30 minutes for a newsletter. So you should be able to get that out weekly. And if, again, make this your own. If you're like, I get what you're saying. Monthly is, too long. I want to do more often. Do every other week. But weekly would be my recommendation for that so that you're staying top of mind. And the rules with email inbox providers like Google and Outlook and whatnot like to see a normal cadence of emails coming in. So with a month, you can run into issues where people forget you or like, oh, I didn't sign up for this and mark you as spam. And then they will permanently prevent you from emailing your list if that happens enough. So by keeping in a regular rhythm, they're like, oh, I always get, an email from whatever your favorite author is on Tuesday. Like they look forward to it. And you're seeing people not open your emails. One, you can clean them off so they're not getting your emails because they've effectively unsubscribed even though they haven't hit the button. And then hopefully by sending them content they like, they shouldn't want to do that. And then you can look at, okay, if a bunch of people aren't opening my emails, then I need to change up my content. And a lot of authors could honestly simplify their newsletters so much. They end up a lot of times looking like magazines where there's a bunch of images, which can end up in the spam filter if you do too many. Again, that does say you can never include an image, but usually text is better if you limit the images. But you want to kind of just streamline everything down more than you think, and you will see more success than if you keep tacking on, let's do this and let's do that and let's do this. It's just going to overwhelm you.
I love that you went deep, did a deep dive there on email, because I think that so often people forget the value of email. I know some people resist even, excuse me, giving their email address away, but as authors and writers, there's still so much value in popping into somebody's inbox. And so when you talk about making it simpler, what is your recommendation for an email? So let's say I'm sitting down to write an email to my list. What's the best way to think about it? Do I want to tell them everything I'm doing or do I want to do little bits? What should it look like?
Yeah, and then this
Right.
is the same formula I'd use for an Instagram caption. So you could use this in both places. Just with an email, you can get longer because you have the option for headlines and to make it skimmable because only about 20% of copy online gets read. It's not like a book. So they're going to be skimming more through it to find out, is this information useful versus with a story? They're going to want to get every little detail and soak it all up. So you start with something intriguing, a statement, a hook. Um, this can be a life update. I'm working behind the scenes on my book, or I have this character art I've been waiting to show you. Here it is, or whatever. You're gonna just introduce whatever you want to tell them. And again, you can kind of play around with length and see what your audience likes, depending on what it is. If it's character art, you probably just want to get right to the point. If it's behind the scenes, you might want to say, I had this inspiration from whatever, then now this character is turning into, you can go into a little more. And by using the headlines, you can make it skimmable so it doesn't seem long. And then, so then you kind of segue a bit, explain or just show whatever it is, or, hey, my book's ready for pre-order now. Um, explain what you started out, give context to it, and then you're going to follow up with a call to action that's applicable to whatever you sent them. So, an example of character art, you can ask them to reply back. That's a call to action that's not used enough because, again, email providers like that. So, or that could be a segue to, you know, it's on pre-order now. Or if you're like, it's out today, then obviously you're gonna be go buy it on Amazon or wherever you're selling, depending on whether you're going wide or not. But yeah. And then just honestly, then you sign off and get out. Like it should be an Instagram caption that's been stretched a little bit, and again, experiment with everything because you may find you can have longer emails and people will read them if you make them skimmable and intriguing enough. It's where every line has to make you want to read the next line versus, which is similar to a book, but people will skim still more naturally versus a story you really have to pay attention to certain things or you'll be like, what? When did they end up in a tree? I missed something. Had to go back to the beginning of this, but
No, that's great. And so when you say skimmable, d should someone write an email with, individual lines, blocks of text? Like, how l what's the longest, like, a block of text should be? Because I know I've heard different perspectives on that.
yeah, it you want to and that's hard when you're used to writing a book because I kind of come from I started with marketing and then decided I wanted to write a book, so I'm coming from like the opposite direction to writing, and so it can be weird to be like, but this isn't grammatically correct with anything. This goes under the sales copy category. Any copywriting where you're wanting to sell something, which effectively you're doing if it is just giving out some information leading up and teasing a book. Uh, you want to break every rule to get them to read it within, don't have 10 million typos, don't do something really weird, but like capitalize a letter that, the whole word that shouldn't be, use headlines, break up sentences. Generally, a single sentence shouldn't be longer than 13-ish words, but again, you know, just you kind of have to play around with that and see what works and how it's laying out. And you don't want usually email providers, you can change whether something's narrow or wide too. That can help if you make it more narrow. It's easier to read. The wider it is, the more your eyes have to go side to side, and that can make it harder to read in and of itself. And like for paragraphs, you don't probably want more than 3 to 4 sentences. If you're getting longer than that, then you need to do a line break. Unless you're sending like your full book blurb or something that's like preset, then leave that as is because your brain will switch and be like, okay, this is a book blurb. Like I need to soak up the whole thing more so than if you're just talking about behind the scenes stuff. So
That's great advice. I'm sure some writers are listening or cringing at the thought that, breaking some rules, but then in a way I kind of look at it as having a little bit of fun when
yeah,
you
this
can
should be
break the
fun.
rules.
It's a newsletter, not a novel, and I can't remember who said it. Where there quote about how you want to write for the ear and the tempo, and here are some short sentences. And now I'm going to go into a really long sentence that sounds kind of run on, but I'm making music with my voice. And now I go back to something kind of medium, and like you want that rhythm more so in a newsletter where you're kind of crafting music with it so it sounds more like you're talking versus when you're going over, a paragraph in a book, you want to pay attention a little bit more, to the structure and is the verb in the right place versus with, newsletters like you want to do more like someone's talking, but you're not always going to say something in the perfect grammatical order like you would when you're sitting down to write a sentence in your book.
Oh, I love that. I love the thought of it being kind of lyrical and musical. I'm gonna hold tuck that one away from for myself for sure. And I love how you said that the newsletter can be the repurposing of an Instagram caption because that to me sounds like it allows for even more simplification of the process that, "Oh, I already put this on Instagram. I can then just take this and put it in my newsletter, maybe add some extra bits."
Yeah, you
So
could
and
reverse it too, honestly. Like, I find the medium of newsletters is much easier for me to speak from, and then you could then take it and chop it into 3 different posts if you make it long enough, or just in general chop it and then say, okay, I'm gonna make each one its own thing. Sometimes that can work better. Where if you're like, I need to get a bunch of thoughts out, and it's like, okay, this is a newsletter. Okay, now how do I part it down for Instagram? Sometimes that can work too depending on if you're someone who has to start out creating graphics first and that's what inspires you, then you're probably gonna start with the caption. If you're like, I just need to get thoughts down, Like, I know, like, I'm a writer. I know how to write like this feels more comfortable. I'm gonna start with this and then go to social media. So this is all the part of just making it your own. Like, start what makes sense to you. Like, I'm talking about marketing, website design, so I'm writing blogs. So often, I'll start there. Like, I know I want to talk about this blog topic. That's gonna be even longer than the newsletter. So then I'm gonna be like, okay, I have this blog. Okay, I know what my call to action is now for everything. So how am I paring it down? But depends on what you're doing. You might find one week you're flipping around and doing it in a different order depending on where your inspiration is coming from. You might be doing all reels that week and then you don't have as much text to work with. So you would need to start with the newsletter. And honestly, one thing I think authors underestimate is how often you can just talk about one thing that has to do with your book and not talk about 5 things through the week. Like, that's another way you can simplify is pick one thing. Like, I'm going to talk about my main female character all this week. Go over every single trait, share quotes about her, like her world, her look, like anything. And I mean, you could probably make content for more than a week out of that. You could make that your whole theme for the month. All you're going to talk about is the main female character and just run with it. Or I want to talk about the world building this week and highlight fun things about that. So that can be another way to simplify, where not, especially when we're talking social media, not everyone is going to see every single post. And either one, they're not going to see everything, or two, they're not going to care because one, you're presenting it slightly different each post, enough where it doesn't seem like you're posting the same thing. But also, a lot of people don't care, like, how many, fan edits there are, whatever popular series we want to pick on. Like, they will not care if they see something similar a second time if they love your characters enough. So,
I love that. I love that idea about really focusing on either one topic a week or one topic for the month, because that does allow for so much more simplification. And I think it's great that you pointed out how not everybody's going to see everything. And I think that sometimes there's that misconception that, oh, if I put it out there, people who are already following me are going to get tired. But I've definitely heard that repetition can be really valuable.
yeah, they say, everyone has to hear something 7 times before they really absorb it. And if it's something you love, like, you could definitely hear more than 7 times. Often that stat's used to, describe teaching something, which you are teaching them something effectively in your marketing. But then there becomes a point with something like books where you love the story that it goes beyond the teaching, versus if I started talking about email marketing like we are today, like, that's different. But
And so what would you say for a writer who say stuck on going back to email? I'm just thinking about coming up with the, subject line, or what should it be, something catchy or just something simple? So how do you like get a reader, to open your email
yeah, the
newsletter?
goal is eventually to get your readers excited enough for the newsletter where the subject line doesn't matter as much. But in the meantime, while you're building up that repertoire, you, you kind of have to play around with what works, and depending on your usually things that sound like they don't really go with the email do well. Like, more random things where it's like, that's intriguing. Like, I just did, as an example, in my own business, I just did something where it was like Elle Woods, from Legally Blonde equals $37. And like, that's like extremely random words that doesn't make any sense. It led up to a product that I have for a welcome sequence, and it's like, that really had nothing to do with what I was talking about. It kind of did because I led up with the story, but like, a lot of times random things are what's gonna get people to open. Like, I was showing the product before I released it to a friend of mine, and she's like, I don't think the subject line you suggested for this email template goes with it. And I'm like, it's not really supposed to. Like, it's the goal of the subject line is to get the email open, not always correlate. And you can have subject lines where it's like that aha moment where you get to the middle. It's like, oh, that's why you had SpaghettiOs as the subject line. I get it now. But and then other times, ones where you just blatantly say, here is the character art, are going to get it open because, like, so clear. If I want to see this, I need to open. Or or whatever the title is your book is out now. Like that. So it can depend on what you're talking to. There's pros and cons to both. You can split test subject lines with most email service providers. I'm on ConvertKit. I know you can do it on there. Flowdesk, MailerLite should have all that, depending on what your plan you're on. But I don't honestly split test as much as I probably should, but because I found the more random kind of works or the very clear, this is what the email is about work for me. But there's always that, in between scenario. I mean, I could throw out random subject lines all day. What you just honestly try something random and you might be surprised.
Yeah, I think that that's true. Sometimes you aren't sure what your audience is gonna connect with, and so definitely playing around with it. I love doing that myself sometimes with our email list and seeing what
Yeah, I
gets
think if
people's
you run
attention.
into where you're just saying something really like boring, quote unquote, like Happy Monday or whatever, those are the things that aren't good. I mean, you never know. Like I said, but like someone's probably not going to open that. Or if you blatantly say something's on sale or something, pros and cons. Like if your book is 99 cents on Amazon, like that can be a good subject line because that's intriguing. I can get it at a discount, but sometimes you're better just having that within the email and doing something else intriguing. And oh, it's 99 cents. By the way, that can work too. So you kind of have to play around with just trying different things and you'll see a pattern eventually. And that's part of why you want to send them more regularly than once a month so that you can learn these things. And then you'll see your newsletter actually being effective instead of just feeling like you're sending, words into the abyss that no one cares about. And honestly, authors in general can just mention their newsletter in general and get more subscribers. Like, that's another thing I see where people are just not talking about it enough. Like, if I had $1 for every time I'd see an author mention their newsletter, like, I'd maybe have 15 bucks. I don't even know if that'll buy me a paperback in today's economy. So, mention it more often than you think in your call to actions on social media because you own your email list versus social media. It's great and you can sell books through it and, get people on your email list and it's part of your sales funnel. But yeah, at the end of the day, your account can get taken down versus your email account getting taken down. And, as long as you're not doing spammy practices and you're cleaning your list and all that, like, I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but like, that would be very odd. Versus, I personally just recently had where I was getting messages saying I was a robot on Instagram, and it's like, I promise you, it's me. There is no robot here. I can't even get mini chat to work. Like, it's just me, myself, and I doing this. Zuckerberg, like, get your stuff together. And I've had my account deactivated temporarily for no reason. I'm like, I have no idea what I did. Like, to this day, like I have no clue. So weird stuff like that can happen. I've seen people, in other industries where they're like, I've had my account for 10 years and thousands of millions of followers and it's just gone and they don't get it back. So,
Yeah, no, that is great advice, and that's something that I think with social media surrounding us so much, everyone forgets about. That again is the huge value of having the email newsletter, is that you own the list, you have direct connection to your people, and they're probably gonna pay attention to you more there, even if you think they're not, than hopping on social media every day because everybody engages in social media in such different ways depending upon, how they use it. I mean, if you're using it for business, you approach it differently than if you're just randomly mindlessly scrolling. So I think that that's such a great reminder to our audience about the value of setting that up. And like you said, to the call to action, for getting on the newsletter list. That's great advice.
yeah, I think
Great
a lot of
reminders.
times we get in our own heads like we're bugging people or, they don't want to see this. And it's like, yeah, they do, especially with emails they're signing up for it versus the algorithm with Instagram. They're not always following you. But even if they are following you, they're saying, I want to see your content, whether they'll be shown it or not is another story. And you have no control over that to an extent. But um, you're not bothering people by reminding your books exist. They want that. They want that experience of it escaping for however many, 400 pages, however long your book is. You're providing something people actively want. It's not like you're trying to sell, underwater basket weaving or something that no one cares about. You are not bugging people. You are providing them something of value and they want to find you. So if you don't post and you don't email and you don't whatever, go to the in-person events, whatever, however much you're extending yourself beyond, online marketing, they want to hear from you.
Yeah, that's great advice too, because I mean, I know that's how I felt in the beginning was, "Oh, no, I'm gonna be bothering people," and then now I'm like, "No, it's okay to be loud and to be bold and to say more things," and I think especially for writers and some of us who are definitely more introverted than others who feel like, "No, I don't wanna be seen," and I think about that in terms of, how when posting on, Instagram or whatever platform someone chooses, how much of their face do people need to see? Or can they just, post
Honestly, as
other things?
much as or as little as you feel comfortable with some caveats that you need a mix of, you know, you do need, occasionally need to show just your book. Like I see some authors where they're more borderline, really, they're influencers who happen to have a book more than authors, and it's all their face, and I'm like, "Oh, your username says author." Like, that took me forever to figure out that you even had a book, so you can't go too far that direction, but most of the people who are probably listening to this aren't going to that extreme where they're basically an influencer with a book versus a writer, but if you want honestly never show your face, you can't take that angle like I didn't for a while, like, there's privacy aspects to this, depending on your comfort level with that or you just don't feel comfortable on camera. Like, and like I've just recently started experimenting with, like reels showing my face more. And like I didn't do that for a long time because it wasn't within something I felt comfortable with. So, you know, and that's why, especially with fiction, the more you can focus on your characters, you more can lean away from showing your face. And that's another thing where so many authors don't talk about their characters enough, like to focus on the tropes and whatever, uproars on in threads it seems like about books almost daily where it's like that's another thing. Like honestly, if more people could just ignore the drama and just focus on posting about their books, I think we would all have a more peaceful, more enjoyable time reading more books. But that's a whole nother discussion. But um yeah, just talking about your characters more, the heart of your story, the world building, because that again is back to the experience someone is buying. You do want to throw in, the behind the scenes, the author humor, about what it's like writing a book, the reader humor, because I imagine all authors are also readers. So, like, it all kind of has a synergy to it. So, you do throw those in. So, don't like find whatever balance works for you, because, like I said, you can't go too far to the, where it's just funny content and then never mentioning your book. But I'm pretty confident whoever's listening to this probably isn't too far to that angle. But it can happen where it's like all you're posting about is, like reader culture. And it's like, you need to talk about your book too. So, like, if anything, if you're nervous about being on camera, you're probably doing better because you're going to naturally lean then into being in the talking about your book side more, which is where you should be. Like, I'd argue 70 to 80% should be about the actual book and what they're going to buy. And then the 20% should be the fun stuff. But again, play around with it. You might find it's more 50-50 for your audience, depending on what your book's about can make a difference. If we want to zoom out of the fiction space, if you're doing something where you're teaching something or changing a mindset, you're probably going to have to do more education content versus for something fiction that's more, entertainment. You don't really have to explain what a book is and, why you should read more. I mean that might be interesting content if you feel inspired to create that. Go for that. But like that sounds not as helpful versus if you're doing a self-help book, you probably need to prove your background and why you're an expert on this versus I wrote a cool story about dragons. Like I don't really need to know your background as much. Just "Oh, there's a cool story about dragons. Like sign me up." So
Yeah, I love that advice about leaning into, I mean, essentially what you already know. You know your book, you know your characters, and just leaning into that comfortable space, and, I love that. I think, that's definitely something I'm gonna take away from this conversation and think about for myself. And so, Hannah, if you were going to give a new writer a piece of advice, what would that be to get started with their marketing?
Start before the book is published or even first drafted. Honestly, you cannot start too early because you have all the behind the scenes stuff, with whatever you're comfortable sharing, that isn't too much of a spoiler. Again, if we're focusing on fiction, if it's nonfiction, you got even more options because you're not really going to spoil something. But I deal mostly with fiction. So you, honestly, just start as soon as you can. If you newsletters, sending them once a week sounds overwhelming. Start with a month for a couple months, then go to twice a month, then get up to the 4 weeks. Instagram, you can do the same thing. Like I'm writing a book also while I'm running this business. Like it's very secondary to me, so I'm like maybe posting once or twice a week over on my author account versus business. I'm definitely posting at least 5 times a week because that's my livelihood. So, you know, while you're in the trenches, trying to figure out, the book writing too, like that can be so good, that content of, especially if it's you're doing more the author life, humor stuff of, oh, I, accidentally wrote the same scene twice or, whatever. Like people eat that up. They want the behind the scenes. They don't want to just see this perfectly presented thing. They want to go with you in the trenches a little bit and see, what was your inspiration behind something and just take up every, nugget they can dig up. I mean, like I said, you should, if you see like popular books, all the, posts and theories and things are like, that is the type of customer you are selling a product to, is someone who is going to eat up every little nugget of information they can find if you present it in a way where it sounds valuable and intriguing. So, share the behind the scenes, start small. If it's overwhelming at first, if you're like, I don't know about showing my face, don't at first. Just start with graphic, grab a stock video and use it for a reel. Sometimes those do better if you're blatantly talking about the characters versus if you're doing something more on the humor side, then you showing your face could often be better. It really depends. It's definitely something you want to think more as an art form than a rigid, oh, these are the rules, I must do these 12 steps to achieve greatness or whatever. It just have fun with it. Start smaller. If it's overwhelming, you'll get into a rhythm and find something that works for you, and then just grow and expand on it as you can. If you're getting closer to actually publishing the book, to put like a month before, that's when you really want to pedal to the metal. The gas is on here, full launch mode. You're sending probably emails more than once a week on some of the days when it's just to announce it's there and show reviews and really get the hype up. You're probably sending extra emails, to your street team if you have one, or ARC readers. Like that's when you pedal to the metal. You've got more going on than the sustainable, normal, I'm drafting the book. So that can be different. But otherwise, just start small, get the rhythm. So then when you do have the pedal to the metal, it doesn't feel as though you're going from 0 to 60. You've like created a nice steady 45 miles an hour and then cranking it up to 60.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you, Hannah, so much for being with us today. And I know, listener, there are some freebies that I'll put that Hannah has offered for our listeners. So those will be in the show notes. And again, happy writing.
Thanks so much for having me.